So if you remember when we were working with algebra blocks, we have what we consider two worlds. We have the positive world and the negative world. And right in between is the zero, right? Because that's our neutral. And if you remember before, we talked about this word called opposite. And opposite just means you're moving worlds, right? So if I have an object, let's make it a Christmas tree. Apparently that doesn't, oh, there we go. Oh, a triangle. If I have an object and I want to make it the opposite, what's going to happen is it's going to go to the opposite world. And then if I have it in the negative, it's going to go to the opposite world. That means it goes to the positive world, right? If it's in the positive and I want the opposite, it goes to the negative world and so on. So let's say this triangle represents the number 3. How about because it has 3 sides? And I have this. I have the number 3 and I have that and then that. And then that, and then that, and then that. So here's what's happening. If I look at it, I start right here. So that's a negative 3. So that means I go to the negative world, right? Then, okay, so I've taken care of this. Now I've got to take care of that. So I need to go to the opposite world. Bam. Okay, so now I've taken care of that. Now I need to look at this one. So now I need to go to another opposite world. All right, so I've taken care of that. Now I need to take care of that one. So I go to the opposite world. And I have taken care of that one now. And so now I need to go to the last one, which means my final answer is in the negative side. So my final answer is negative 3. So multiplying is pretty much doing the same thing. So let's go to a new page here. And let's say that I have, back to my positive and negative world. Okay, so let's say I have 2 times 3. So what that means is I have 2 groups of 3, right? Okay, so if I do that, I have 1 group of 3 and, oh, I gotta do that again. Okay, I've never used the shape button before, so this is new to me. All right, so then I have another group of 3. There we go. All right, so I have 2 groups of 3. And so that really is just the number 6, right? I have 6. If I count all the sides, I've got 6 of them. And if I had 2 times negative 3, that means I have 2 groups of, do you remember elementary when we used to talk that way? 2 groups of negative 3. So technically I've got, oh no. There we go. Holy cows. This is not going the way I wanted it to, you guys. There's one. And oh boy. There. Okay, so we have got 2 groups of negative 3. And so that is technically, if I count up all the sides, they're all on the negative side, it's negative 6. What if I had this, though, a negative 2 groups of 3? What you're going to do is you're going to analyze this. You're going to say, hey, I have 2 groups of 3. Ignore the negative for right now. I have 2 groups of 3. And so then I've got this, right? I've got 2 groups of 3. But then I look and I say, oh, but there's a negative out in front. Right? I've got that negative out in front. Why is this being so annoying? I've got that negative out in front, which means I need to now bring them to the opposite world. So it's just doing the opposite. I bring them to the opposite world, and now I've got them over in the negative side, and so this is negative 6. And if I continued on and said, okay, what if I had negative 2 groups of negative 3? I would first look at the 2 groups of negative 3 like I have here, and then I'm going to deal with that negative right there, and I'm going to say, oh, whatever I have, I need to move it to the opposite world. And so now I have negative 2 groups of negative 3, which cancels out to be a positive 6, because they are now on the positive side. So it took negative numbers and flipped them over to the positive. So really you're just looking at how many negatives you have. And what I do usually is, we rely too much on a calculator, and I'm going to tell you don't have to. Because if you had, let's just say, Negative 4 times negative x times negative x times x. Okay, so let's say this is your problem. First off, I'm going to totally ignore my negatives to start off with, and I'm just going to look at what I have. So I have a 4 and I have no other numbers, so I can't multiply that with anything, so I'll just leave it with the 4. And then I have 1, 2, 3 x's, so that's x to the third power. And now I can deal with my negatives, right? So this means I start in the negatives world. Then this means I flip over to the positive world. Then this means I flip over to the negative world. And this one doesn't do anything, so I'm still going to be in the negative world, so my answer is going to be negative. So just think about where you are and where you're going to end up. If I have negative 2 times negative 8, okay, 2 times 8 is 16. I'm totally ignoring the negatives. And then, so when I made that comment about calculators, you know, if you don't know 2 times 8, fine, okay, use a calculator, go 2 times 8, but don't hit negative 2 times negative 8. Don't do that, because you're likely to make a mistake. Instead, just do 2 times 8, and then use your own brain to figure out whether it's positive or negative. So in this case, I start with negative 2. Hey, I'm at negative 2. I'm in the negative world. Then I multiply by another negative, which flips it over to the positive world. So that means this is a positive 16. So my answer is just 16. Okay, so you can do this without having to use a calculator. And I would like to see you actually, when you do your negatives, to not use a calculator on that. One last thing that I want to go over is, what about exponents and negatives? So if I have a negative y to the fourth power, you'll notice that I have these parentheses around it. And what that's doing is that is saying 4 is to everything inside the parentheses, which means you have 4 negatives. So the 4 is going to be the y. That'll be y to the fourth. And now I got to figure out, is it positive or negative? So I've got 4 negatives. So I'm in the negative world. Then I switch over to the positive world. Then I switch over to the negative world. Then I switch over to the positive world. So I end up being positive. What if you did not have an exponent or a parenthesis there, or if you had a parenthesis but the negative was outside of it? Both of these are the same thing. What that's saying is that exponent is only to what's right below it. It's not to the negative. The negative is separate. So what that's trying to say is you're finding y to the fourth, which is just y to the fourth. And that's a positive y to the fourth. And then you have that negative out in front, which flips over to the negative world. So now you're saying it's negative. And so then that would be your answer.